We now understand what sitting is, the importance of not sitting for longer than 30 minutes when we do sit. We've seen the evidence that lifespan is actually improved with avoiding sitting longer than 30 minutes. But what's the mechanism? Why would sitting for longer than 30 minutes at a time cause a problem? Let's take a closer look. This is what the research has found. Prolonged sitting decreases activity of lipoprotein lipase. Lipoprotein lipase is an enzyme in the cell wall of muscle tissue. This enzyme's responsibility is to take up the bad cholesterol from the circulation and deposit from muscle the good cholesterol into the circulation. What sitting does is it decreases activity of lipoprotein lipase even after 30 minutes. But it seems to not have this effect short of 30 minutes. When lipoprotein lipase activity is diminished, it means that the muscles are not picking up triglycerides, which is a bad cholesterol, and they're not depositing into the circulation HDL, which is a good cholesterol. That means that in the bloodstream, there's going to be more triglycerides and less HDL cholesterol. What this does is leads to plaques in the arteries, and plaques in the arteries subsequently lead to heart disease, specifically heart attack, as well as stroke, which is plaques in the brain. As if that wasn't enough, prolonged sitting also decreases activity of another enzyme in muscle. At the border of muscle tissue is also another enzyme called GLUT, or muscle glucose transporter. This is another important enzyme for taking bad stuff out of the circulation. What GLUT does is it responds to insulin after we eat a meal. After we eat a meal, the pancreas senses high blood sugar, it releases insulin. Insulin goes to GLUT on the muscle border and tells GLUT, you're going to see some sugar coming, take it up into your muscle and use it as fuel. When we sit, even as short as 30 minutes, but not short of 30 minutes, GLUT activity decreases. What that means is it takes more insulin for muscle to get the message that it's time to take up glucose. And more insulin over time, over and over again, repeatedly taxing the pancreas to produce more and more insulin, leads the pancreas to fatigue and no longer be able to support the excess demands for insulin necessary to get glucose into muscle. This leads to a state of insulin resistance where the cells are not responding to insulin and glucose starts to build up in the circulation. This in turn leads to obesity. We're not actually able to use any of the sugar that we ingest. It just sits around in our circulation and causes us to feel hungry and need to eat more. And it also leads to diabetes, which is a state of chronically elevated blood sugar. And finally, if all of that wasn't enough, there's an increased risk of hip fractures, which can lead to death in the elderly. This is because when we sit for longer than 30 minutes and for a duration during the day for longer than 8 hours, it leads to decreased bone mineral density. So bones become more fragile and are more likely to break when we fall. Because sitting is so common and because it is such a health risk, it's been dubbed the new smoking.